Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Harshmeet Singh. This is a place where I try and help UPSC Civil Services aspirants having PSIR as an optional subject. And for those who don't have PSIR as an optional, I also try and put out videos on important current affairs, essay writing, so on and so forth. Later on, you would also see me putting out a few videos on how to write great answers. But for now, we are focusing on one of the most important and relevant topics for PSIR optional. Today, we are taking up a topic from Paper 1 Part A. The topic is Political Ideologies, in which we will be discussing today the ideology of Fascism. This is one of those ideologies that continuously appear in the UPSC PSIR paper. Every 3 or 4 years, you will see a question based on this. It's a very interesting ideology to study in the sense that most other ideologies, be it Marxism, Liberalism, Socialism, most of them have been spread to many parts of the world. But here is an ideology, Fascism, that was seen in very few countries, mainly in Italy, Germany, later on to some extent in Austria, Japan as well. However, this is a very interesting ideology in the sense that even today, you will see a lot of people using this word. A lot of people, when they don't like a political leader, they call them a fascist. They say that this political leader is doing whatever he or she wants without listening to any other authorities. He is a fascist. Fascist usually is a term used to define a person who considers himself above the law, who thinks that their word, who thinks that their instruction is the final word for everyone, who does not believe in any restrictions on their power. Some people might also call them as dictators, but fascism is slightly different from a dictatorship. A fascist leader glorifies violence. A fascist leader glorifies war. He wants the people to prepare themselves to fight a war so that the country can regain their lost glory. The interesting thing about these ideologies, such as fascism, is that it usually emerges in a country or an area where there is a social unrest and where the economic conditions are not great. Usually, when everything is going fine in a country politically, economically, you do not see ideologies such as fascism emerging. It's very similar to another example. Let's take this example. You will see many godmen emerge from time to time in India. And many people think, how is it that common people believe these godmen? They should use their scientific knowledge, they should use their common sense. How can they believe anyone who claims that I have magical powers? Now, the reason why people start believing in such people is that when people are going through a very tough time personally, when nothing is going right for them, and then when they see a ray of hope in someone who might be irrational, who might defeat all the logic, but if they see a ray of hope in that person, they will follow that person. Similar is the case with fascist leaders as well. Whenever we talk about fascism, the one name that should strike your mind first is the name of Benito Mussolini, the leader of Italy, who has been regarded as a father of this ideology of fascism. There's a very famous quote that he used regarding fascism. He said, "All within the state, nothing outside the state, and nothing against the state." This, in simple terms, is fascism. Now, to understand this quote is extremely important for you. UPSC, in fact, has given this quote exactly like this in the paper and asked you to explain this. This explains the fact that fascism is an ideology, demands that people in the country should be ready to sacrifice each and everything for the country. They should never ever try and question their leader. Their leader is the undisputed champion of the rights of the people. Whatever their leader says, there cannot be any questions asked on that. It may be logical, it may be illogical, rational, irrational, that does not matter. Your existence is because of the state. Your existence is to serve the state. And by state, we mean the leader of the state. That is what a fascist ideology actually entails. Now, if you look at how fascism emerged, as I told you earlier, these kind of ideologies usually emerge in times of conflict, when the country is not going through a great time. This was the case with Italy between the two world wars. This was an ideology that was propagated by Benito Mussolini. Now, you might say that if you look at the history, in the First World War, Italy did not lose the war. Please understand this. In the First World War, Italy was actually in the winning side. But the problem it had Italy always believed that they were not given their due after the World War. See, whenever the war ends, there is usually some reparations that are imposed, some fines that are imposed on the losing side. They have to pay up some money for waging the war. That money is usually divided by the winning side. Italy thought that they were not given the amount of money or the amount of spoils or the amount of benefits that they deserved after the World War I. Italy also was not a very unified country as such. In world history, you read about unification of Germany, unification of Italy. The interesting part is these are the two countries that were the last to be unified as one single country. There were various divisions within the country. And that also adds on to becoming one of the reasons why fascism emerged and flourished in these two countries specifically. If you look at fascism, one interesting way to understand this is, unlike other ideologies, this does not have very preset or predefined goals and definitions. It is so dependent on one single leader that whatever the leader says becomes a fact. Whatever the leader says becomes true. And when you have an ideology dependent on a person rather than a book or rather than some set laws or patterns, this is where you have a problem that the ideology does not have a very well-defined structure. And that is a problem with fascism. It has some declared rules and principles, but it also has many other principles that the leader, Benito Mussolini, included from time to time. Whatever suited his purpose, let's take a simple example. If he wanted that his opposition party should be attacked, he will tomorrow give an order to his followers that this opposition party is against our country, whatever they think is anti-national, go and attack them. That is how a fascist ideology goes on and expands itself on the thoughts of its own leader. It was adopted, as I said, in Germany as well by Adolf Hitler and in some other countries from time to time. Whenever a leader thought that they want the entire country to listen to them and not really question them, that is when they took the help of fascist ideology. Fascism is opposed to many other ideologies existing at that point of time. For example, it is strictly opposed to liberalism. It is strictly opposed to Marxism as well. Fascism tried to take advantage of the frustrated youth in the society. As I said earlier, when you have a society where politically and economically the things are not stable, many people are out of jobs, many people don't see a bright future for themselves, they are looking for someone to blame. They are looking for someone to blame for their condition. And they think that whatever their leader says is true. So if their leader tomorrow says that blame him or blame her, he's the one because of which you don't have a war, the youth just blames them. They don't really have any common values, they don't really have any common ideals. Whatever their leader says becomes the law of the land for fascists. It emerged during the two world wars. It also is seen as an ideology that is against the concept of democracy. The reason is simple. Democracy means that the people would decide who their leader will be. Democracy means that after a certain amount of years, 4, 5, 6, whatever, the people can choose to replace their leader, have a new government. But fascism does not accept the idea of changing a leader. For fascism, whatever the leader says is the last word. And it is not really a coincidence that Germany and Italy were the countries where fascism flourished the most. As I said earlier, these were the two countries whose unification was the last in entire Europe. While Germany lost the First World War, there was anger in Germany, anger about the fact that they were being forced to pay a lot of money. As you remember, the Treaty of Versailles was signed and they were asked to pay billions and billions of dollars to the other countries. Italy, on the other hand, while they would have won the war, but they did not get any benefit out of the war. And that is why both of these countries and their leaders thought that it is a good time to now agitate our youth, to encourage our people to protest against everyone else so that we can get and snatch whatever is ours. That is how fascism actually developed. By now you would have understood fascist leaders depend upon agitating the youth. If people in this country, youth in the society are satisfied with their way of living, they will never fall victim to fascist ideology. Fascism requires people who are not happy with the current situation. It requires people to agitate. Fascist leaders don't want any other option to be available. Fascist ideology rejects pluralistic idea of democracy. For them, there is no other option available to the people. They don't even believe in international organizations settling disputes. As I said earlier, for fascist leader, it is good to glorify violence. The leaders make their youth believe that we are the most superior clan in the world. Everyone is jealous of us. In order to take what is ours, we have to fight a war. There is no point of going to the UN. There is no point of going anywhere else. There is no point of having elections because people will choose a weak leader. Whoever has come to power, has now become powerful, should remain in power if country such as Italy has to go back to its glory days. See, one of the very interesting things in many countries is that many leaders come and they try to glorify the past. I'll give you multiple examples here. Take the example of Turkey. See what is happening in Russia right now. And the same is the example of Italy. These are the countries which historically have been the centers of huge empires. Turkey was the center of the Ottoman Empire. So even today, the Turkish leader Erdogan, he keeps on saying in his speech that we would want to go back to the days of the Ottoman Empire. We want the glory days of Turkey to return when Turkey was the center of the Ottoman Empire. That is how the leaders in this part of the world, they kind of make their own sketch and their own image so big that they want the people to support them no matter what. It is also one of the ways for the leaders to take the people's attention away from important issues such as unemployment, inflation, corruption. When the leaders don't have an answer to these kind of problems, they want to distract the people and want to give them something new to play with. So Erdogan in Turkey, when Turkey is going through a huge economic crisis, galloping inflation, their currency is declining, it's crashing, Erdogan just spreads the message we want to go back to the glory days of Ottoman Empire. He propagates a message that because everyone is so jealous of us in the region, the countries don't want us to go back to that era. Look at what is happening in Russia. Ever since Putin has waged this war on Ukraine, he keeps on going back to the idea that USSR, Soviet Union, should never have disintegrated. He keeps on saying that disintegration of USSR was a tragedy. He says that Ukraine should never have been an independent country. He wants to go back to that era of USSR where Russia was the center of it and it controlled the entire Soviet Union. Something similar was the case with Italy of that time. Italy was the center of this huge, impressive Roman Empire. And Benito Mussolini again propagated this idea that, see, we used to be such a powerful country, we used to be such a huge empire. These neighboring countries were jealous of us. That is why they have taken away our glory. Let us come together. Let us fight against them so that we can bring back our glory. The only way to do that is to support me. You support me, I will wage a war and we will go back to those glory days, I promise you. So, fascism in a way is also regarded as a theory of reaction. How? It was a theory that emerged as a reaction or as against many of the existing theories or ideologies such as democracy, socialism, communism. Democracy, why? Because democracy allows the people to change their leaders. Democracy allows the people to have a new government. Fascism was dead against it. Democracy, communism, all of them wanted to take the society forward, while fascism wanted to take the country in the older age. As you can see here, go back to the old glory days of the Roman Empire. Go back to the old glory days of the Ottoman Empire. In fact, in case of Germany also, Hitler played the same game. Germany was also part of the Roman Empire. It was called the Reich. Hitler told the people of Germany, if you support me, I will go back to the glory days of the Reich, the Second Reich, and we will be great again. You have to just vote for me. You have to make sure that you support me. Fascism does not support the idea of equality. It does not support the idea of people having equal rights. It believes in the virtue of one supreme leader or a dictator. Whatever he or she says is the last word. Many people have given important quotes about Mussolini, while Mussolini himself also has said a lot of important things. MacIver, for example, said that Mussolini had his own personal army called the Black Shirt Militia. Although Italy had a king at that point of time, but the real power was always with Benito Mussolini. The interesting part is, although fascism was a theory of reaction, that is, it was a reaction to existing ideologies of democracy, communism, socialism, etc. When it came into picture, it again became an ideology against the very idea of revolution. Let me repeat, please understand this. When fascism was introduced, it was a theory of reaction against the existing ideologies. But now when fascism started to spread, it wanted to make sure that people are not allowed to protest against fascism. So fascism also tried to make sure that there is no revolution possible against it. There was no one who was allowed in the society to protest. Whenever a government wants to control the people in the society, the first thing that they always do is capture the news. Even today you will see many people putting allegations around the world that the government is controlling the news channels, government is forcing the news channels to show a certain propaganda. And this is an allegation in countries around the world. This is not something new. From the time of the First and the Second World War, governments around the world have tried to control the news to make up the minds of the people and bend them in a certain direction. The best way to influence people is to control the news. Remember, when the British were here, when they were ruling over India, they were so hell-bent on controlling and censoring the newspapers. Remember all that, the Vernacular Press Act, etc. All that was done because the British wanted to control what is being printed in the newspaper in the form of the news. Similarly, fascists also obstruct the supply of news. They brought the cinema, they brought the press, everything was under government control. Nothing was neutral. Even the judiciary was not neutral. If you want to compare this with today's time, again, I'm not saying it's a perfect comparison, but look at what is happening in China. It is widely believed that in China, the judiciary is not neutral. If the government of China is against you, your case will be heard and you will be given the punishment within a few days. The government of China controls what can be published in the newspapers. The government of China controls what can be shown on the news channel, what can be shown in the news. They control which foreign company or news channel can operate in China and which cannot. most of the technology companies, social media websites that we use in India or around the world are not operating in China. Again, I'm not saying China is a fascist regime, but there are comparisons that you can draw. Today, if you want to criticize China, you can call it a fascist regime, although they would obviously not agree to it, they would not accept it, but there are signs that you see of this happening in China as well. That is what fascism wants to do. Very interestingly, Mussolini himself in 1932 talked about fascism. He said that fascism believes in holiness and in heroism. Actions of fascist state will not be influenced by any economic motive. All the actions of the state are only to bring back the glory, only to transform the society. He was not concerned with economic transformation. He was not concerned with anything else in the society. In 1922, he gave a very famous speech. I would want you to read this multiple times because these are the important speeches from where the UPSC can just take 1 or 2 lines and then ask this in the PSIR paper and ask you to comment. So you should know the context of it. Mussolini said, "We have created our myth. The myth is a faith, it is passion, it is not necessary that it shall be a reality." So he himself believes that the idea that he is propagating might not be reality. It is a reality by the fact that it is a God, a hope, faith, that is courage. Our myth is the nation, our myth is the greatness of the nation. Remember the first quote that I told you about everything within the nation, nothing outside the nation, everything for the nation. This is what he means here as well. He accepts the fact that the ideas that he has propagated in Italy, all of them might not be true, all of them might not be accurate. But he still would do that because it is a myth that he wants the people to accept and he wants the people to not question anything against it. Now, if you look at the basis of fascism and see who were the supporters of fascism, many people believe that fascism was mainly supported by the lower middle class. Now, this is partially true. Again, as I told you, fascism and these kind of ideologies are supported by people who are having a tough time, who see the future very bleak, who don't see many good opportunities to work, many good opportunities to have livelihood. They are the ones who are likely to support them because they want a change. Fascism, on the other hand, was something that took help of problems in the society. For example, small businessmen, shopkeepers, anyone whose livelihood was threatened by capitalism, by socialism, all of them were supporters of fascism. The idea was to put the blame on foreign organizations, put the blame on any other country. Fascism recruited people from all classes without any distinction between where you came from. The only idea was whether or not you are loyal to the leader. As long as you are loyal to the leader, that is what matters. Also, fascism never wanted to create a peaceful society. They knew that it is only a society with fissures, only a society with problems, with issues, which will help in fascism growing to a larger extent. The interest of fascism was to exploit the prevailing social tensions. When small businessmen were blaming the big business people were blaming the labor unions. Fascism did not want to end that. They were happy with it because only as long as people were unhappy with anyone would they join the fascist militia and they would work with Benito Mussolini to fight his or her wars. Now, in a fascist society, what role do women play? In a fascist society, women are usually considered as second-class citizens. Why? Women were mainly given the duty to give birth to as many children as possible. Because the larger the number of people in the society, larger will be the army, the military that a fascist leader wants. So encouragement was given to women who would give birth to as many children as possible. In fact, Mussolini had policies which did not allow women to do any job outside the home, because the job of the women was considered as to give birth to warriors and do nothing else. In fact, he distributed gold medals to mothers who produced the most children, and similar policy was then adopted in Nazi Germany as well. By the way, interestingly, do you know, a little while after Russia launched the war on Ukraine, Russian President Vladimir Putin also encouraged its women to have many children. In fact, Vladimir Putin started saying that I will give the title of Mother Russia to those women who have multiple children. Again, I'm not saying that Russia has become a fascist country, but you do see parallels of what is happening in today's Russia or China with what was happening then in Italy or in Germany. So in a fascist society, be it Italy, be it Germany, women were not considered as equal citizens. They were mainly confined to gender roles, giving birth to as many children as possible, making sure that the military of the country never has a short supply of military leaders. What about the concept of a new man? Now, in a fascist society, Italy of that time, Germany of that time, there was an interesting concept of a new man. New man meant a man that is not really focusing on achieving something personally. A man that would actually go against the bourgeois, that would go against the Marxists, that would go against liberals, etc. A new man was supposed to be a man who would love violence, who would want to fight for the country, who would want to take up the arms, who would want to become a warrior. Again, see, this ideology is taking the country back to the medieval era. While all the other ideologies, capitalism, liberalism, Marxism, whatever you like or dislike, at least they are taking the country forward. But fascist ideology is taking the country back to the medieval era. Remember, in the medieval era, the people were born with only one job: to train for the war, to ensure that violence is glorified. This is what they expect the new man to be. They expect the new man to be masculine, to focus on how they can give back to the country by physically contributing to the military. Hitler also liked this idea. Hitler also said the new man should be slim, slender, like a greyhound. Greyhound is that ferocious dog. Tough like a leather, hard like the crushed steel. Again, they wanted their youth to be like the Roman leaders, not like intellectual, not like scientists or educationists, not moving in the future, but moving back to the past. And that is why fascism by many people is regarded as an ideology that takes the country back rather than taking the country forward. Similarly, a very interesting role is played by education as well. Fascism believes that education is necessary, but not the kind that we know today. As per fascist leaders, education's goal is not to build people's intellect. It is to build people's character. It is to ensure that they teach their children to obey the leader as much as possible. See the interesting comparison here. Our education system tells us that you should ask questions, you should be inquisitive. If someone gives you the wrong order, you should ask back the question, you should ask for clarification, etc. But the fascist leaders are of the opposite view. According to them, the job, the role of good education system is not really to teach the people about good intellect. It is to tell the people that you have to obey your leader. Rather than going into independent thinking, the leaders wanted the education system to spread the fascist ideology. So education is not banned. Education is an important part of fascist society, but not the kind of education that we know of today. It is the kind of education that should prepare the soldiers, that should prepare people who do not ask questions from the supreme leader. Whatever the supreme leader says has to be accepted as the face value and no question should be asked from it. As you can understand, the kind of ideology fascism is, there would obviously be a lot of critique of fascism by many people. For example, first, what do the liberals say about fascism? See, fascism and liberalism are almost opposite to each other. Liberals and fascists do not agree on anything. When the idea of liberalism is that the man is rational, they should be given the freedom to decide whatever they want for themselves. Fascism believes that no, you should just follow one true leader and his actions, his orders are final. Fascism goes against the idea of individual liberty and it propagates the idea of absolute authority. Fascism wants to propagate the irrational element of the human nature. According to fascism, man should not be let free to have their own thoughts. They should be told by the leader what to do and they should follow it. Fascism goes against the liberal idea of nature and it propagates the idea of hero worship. Most importantly, fascists don't believe there is any other option in the society. The entire idea of liberalism is that it propagates democracy, means people can choose their own leader. Whenever a government or leader is chosen, they are chosen for a specific number of years, 4, 5, 6, 3, whatever. After that, there has to be elections and a new leader has to be chosen. Fascism does not have any scope of choosing or changing your government. Fascism does not believe in pluralistic nature of the society. They don't even want any other political party to exist. They believe in monopoly of a single political party without any option to choose from. Similarly, fascist people don't believe in constitution. See, the entire idea of constitution is that it restricts the power of the leader. What does a constitution do? It tells the leader what you can do and what you cannot do. It tells the leader these are the limits to your power. You can only give these orders. You cannot give orders beyond this. But a fascist leader obviously would not want that. A fascist leader by definition would want the freedom to decide whatever they want. That is why fascism demolishes constitution and constitutional government. They don't want any control over the power of their one true leader. Similarly, people who follow the Marxist theory, they also are against fascism. Why? If you look at Marxism, Marxism has always been against the idea of capitalism. That is, few people controlling the source of the society. As per the Marxist leaders, fascism is actually a way to protect capitalism. They say that fascism suppresses the class conflict on one hand and it also goes against the international movement. Now, please understand, and all of you who would have read communism would know, as per communism, a very important part of the theory of communism is international cooperation. According to communism, there will be an overthrow of the government. The workers will come to power. Governments will not exist. But for that overthrow to happen, international community has to come together. Workers of the world unite. That is what the famous clarion call of Marxism is. For Marxists, the fact that fascist leaders see every other country as their enemy is a very, very bad thing. The lack of international cooperation that fascist leaders have, that is a worrying point for the Marxist. Antonio Gramsci, about whom you read in Western political thought, he was jailed by the fascist leaders. He was jailed under the Mussolini government in Italy. He also said the same thing, that fascists actually help the capitalist people. How? Because capitalists are the ones who donate money to these leaders, and fascist leaders also need money to run their government, to run their militia, and the capitalist and the fascist in the background have a combined team together. Although fascists would never accept it, but the Marxists say that fascist leaders try to protect capitalism as much as possible. This is everything you needed to know about fascism as a political ideology. These are the few questions that have been asked from this ideology by UPSC in the previous years. And I'm sure that you would be able to solve all of these based on whatever we have discussed so far. As I said earlier, if you want to write answers to these questions and if you want me to evaluate them, I'll be happy to do that. You can mail your answers here and I will try and give you feedback on them. Also, if you have still not liked and commented and subscribed to our channel, please do that right now. I'll be putting on more videos of PSIR, main answer writing, current affairs, and a lot of other things which will help you in your UPSC preparation. Do share this with your other friends as well who are preparing for the UPSC examination. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good day ahead. Jai Hind.